When I think of my creativity journey, stretching over many, many decades, I have to thank so many people who impacted me, who influenced me, who steered me, and in a sense empowered me. And I always think of my life as a life before creativity and a life after creativity. And probably the one person who impacted me more than anyone else was Paul Torrance uh, at the University of Georgia. He was my professor, my mentor, and stayed my mentor for nearly 20 years. And there are so many stories of Paul Torrance, this wonderful, incredible human being, not only a creativity expert, but truly a human being. I remember we moved to Georgia, and after about, we were staying in a very small house, my wife Inga, my two sons, and around us was just sand and nothing else. And one Saturday morning early, after about 2 weeks after we moved in, early morning, I heard little noises outside my front door, not knowing what it was, but I left it. But it just kept on, these noises. And so after a couple of hours, I went outside, and there was Paul Torrance and his wife Pansy, and they were both in their 60s. They were on their knees planting daffodils in the sand patch in front of my front door. I thought it's remarkable. This world figure, this Mr. Creativity of the 20th century, on his knees planting daffodils in my front patch of sand. And to me, it had a everlasting impact as the true example of a servant leader. That the more you serve people, the more you grow as a leader. And in his case also, the two sort of serving creativity. There's so many other stories about Paul Torrance. Uh, I remember I was there when he was on his deathbed, he was dying, and I went to visit him in the hospital and spent the day with him. And I brought with me a stack of cards that South African children wrote to wish him well. And he was very ill at that stage. He was whispering, and he was ill. He was very ill. And I took the cards and I wanted to put it on the table next to his bed. But he shook his head and he said, no, no, put it on my chest. So I put these cards on his chest, and then he took them one by one and he read them, sometimes smiling. And then I took the card and put it on the table next to the bed, and he read all of them. And I looked at him and I was astounded. I've known him at that stage for more than 20 years, and still I was overwhelmed by what he did there. And he could see this. And then he looked up in his whispering voice and he said to me, these little children took time and effort to write these cards. The least I can do is show respect and read them. And to me, in a sense, it was the proof of the pudding. The way Paul Torrance lived is the way that he died. The values that even when no one was looking, he lived those values. But maybe the story and the experience that sort of stands out for me was when he got a stroke, Paul Torrance. He was very, very ill. I wasn't in Georgia anymore. I was in South Africa, but I heard about it, and I went to visit him about 3 months after the stroke. Severe stroke. He couldn't speak. His body was impaired. And I remember driving up to his house and then worried. I knocked on the door, front door, but there he was. He opened the door and he looked completely healed. And he was excited, and it was remarkable. And then he started explaining to me while we were standing there in the front door how, his one brain that took over the functions of the brain that was impaired. And so he was explaining this to me. But then he said, look, I'd like to show you something. And as we were walking to his study, he said to me, the past 3 months while I was a stroke patient, he called himself a stroke patient, he said, I realized that there are probably tens of thousands of people in similar circumstances. People that after a stroke, they have to deal with life differently. It's difficult. They have to cope in different kind of ways. And so we walked into his study. And there on the table was his latest book, his latest publication, a book called A Recipe Book for Stroke Patients. You see, and I think this is what creativity is all about. This was what Torrance was all about. A kind of a mental shift that maybe creativity isn't about problem solving. Because you see, one person gets a stroke and curses the world, and the other person gets a stroke and says, wow, what an opportunity. So I believe that creativity is much more about opportunity finding than problem solving.